All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Friday Q&A, a webinar series produced by the UF Thomson Earth Systems Institute, Scientists in Every Florida School program, and the Community Scholars Initiative. Each Friday at 3 p.m. for 30 minutes, a scientist will present on their area of expertise, followed by a question and answer session. Scientists in Every Florida School is a free program housed within the Thomson Earth Systems Institute at the University of Florida. The CEFS program connects and builds long-term partnerships between teachers and scientists in order to bring current scientific research and big data into classrooms in Florida and beyond. The Community Scholars Initiative is based at Valencia College in Orlando, Florida. Our goal is to connect, create, and elevate educational experiences in the classroom and our community. Supported by the Lake Nona community, we facilitate programs in both Orange and Osceola County schools and leaders businesses to build out-of-school learning programs. During the COVID-19 school closures, we are happy to partner with CEFS to continue engaging with our students, teachers, and parents in a digital platform. Today, we are joined by Randall Wells, co-founder and director of the Chicago Zoological Society's Sarasota Dolphin Research Program, which conducts the world's longest running study of a wild dolphin population. He began studying bottlenose dolphins in Sarasota Bay, Florida as a high school volunteer at Mote Marine Laboratory in 1970. Wells received his bachelor's degree in zoology from the University of South Florida in 1975, his master's in zoology from the University of Florida in 1978, and his PhD in biology from the University of California, Santa Cruz in 1986, and was awarded a post-doctoral fellowship with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in 1987. Wells' current research program uses a collaborative approach to examine the behavior, social structure, life history, ecology, health and population biology of bottlenose dolphins along the central west coast of Florida, with studies focusing on up to 5 concurrent generations of a locally resident 170-member dolphin community. Recent research topics include the effects of human activities on coastal dolphins, such as boat traffic, fishing activities, human feeding of wild dolphins, and environmental contaminants, and the impacts of other environmental disturbances such as red tides. So today, as Randy tells you about his work, please add your questions into the chat and one of our moderators will ask your questions. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Randy. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that I'm here as a representative of a team. Doing dolphin research in the wild is not something that a single person can accomplish very well. So we've been very fortunate to put together a superb team of staff members and graduate students over the years who work with us in Sarasota Bay and elsewhere to learn about the bottlenose dolphins and apply that information around the world to conservation situations. So here you can see the team members scattered about in the US as well as in Florida, and a few of the dolphins that we've become familiar with over the years. The next slide, please. So our research began back in 1970. And at that point, there was a fellow named Blair Irvine, who's in the left in the picture in the bottom, who came to Florida to work at Mote Marine Laboratory to work on a project to try to teach dolphins to keep sharks away from divers. At the time, he also brought with him an interest in what wild dolphins do. And at the time that he began this work, nobody really knew what wild dolphins did in local bay waters. Did they spend all their time in one place? Did they move around the Gulf Coast? Did they move into the middle of the Gulf of Mexico? No one really knew. So Blair worked it out with a local dolphin collector, also shown in the picture here, to allow us to begin tagging dolphins. And I began working with him as a high school assistant at the very beginning of the project. So we went out into the local bay waters and put tags on dolphins. The tags didn't last very well, but we learned that we could tell dolphins apart from distinctive markings and from the tag scars. And we got a hint about the fact that these animals have some residency to the area. Next slide. So building on this over the years, we've been able to use things like the natural markings on the dolphin's dorsal fins, like fingerprints, to be able to keep track of individuals over time. And we've monitored these animals through photographic identification surveys that we conduct on a monthly basis to give us an indication of where the dolphins are, who they're spending their time with, what kind of condition they're in within our study area. So recognizing over time that we had not just a resident population of dolphins, but a long-term resident population of dolphins, we were able to establish a research program that made use of this well-known cast of characters. So the pieces that go into knowing this population so well, where we can put all these labels on the dolphins that you see in the picture in the center right, we have the monthly surveys to keep track of the individuals. We have periodic dolphin health assessments where we catch small numbers of animals in shallow water, sample them and release them on site. We also try to put these animals into an ecological perspective to try to understand how they're responding to things in their environment, like availability of prey fish. So we look at the numbers of fish that in the area at any given time. We conduct what are called focal animal behavioral observations, which means that we're doing systematic studies of the behavior of the animals, not just recording every exciting thing they do, but systematically recording what they do at particular time points. We also have established and continue to establish a series of passive acoustic listening stations around Sarasota Bay. This allows us to listen in on what the animals are doing from shoreside stations that are connected to the cloud. So the sounds that the dolphins are producing, the sounds that the prey fish are producing, the sounds that the snapping shrimp and other invertebrates are producing, as well as human activity such as boat noise, are recorded and transmitted in such a way that we can understand where the dolphins are going and what kind of an acoustic environment they're in. We also work closely with Mote Marine Laboratory's Stranding Response Program, and they bookend the project. We study the dolphins from the time they're born, they recover the carcasses when the animals die, and between us we develop an understanding of what it takes to be a bottlenose dolphin in Sarasota Bay. Next slide, please. So basically what we found is that we have a long-term, multi-decadal, multi-generational, year-round resident community of about 170 dolphins. And this community ranges from the southern edge of Tampa Bay down to Venice Inlet and offshore to within about a mile or so shore. At any given time, we can have as many as 5 concurrent generations of relatives within the area. That's not to say they're all living in the same place and swimming together. Instead, we envision it to be more like a neighborhood where the animals remain in the area, they encounter one another, but the families don't share a house. We've had individuals that have lived up to 67 years of age in the case of females and up to 52 years in the case of males. And in the photograph that you see here that I refer to frequently in this presentation, the animal on the right or on the left, Nick Lowe, was 62 years old in this photo, and she lived to be 67 years of age, the oldest documented bottlenose dolphin in the world. Next. So to put this into perspective, we've been studying the dolphins of Sarasota Bay for 50 years. We've also been studying animals in surrounding waters and elsewhere around the world. And what we found is that we have this community of dolphins in Sarasota Bay that can be found in this area. And this is depicted by the colored dots in the map that show the locations of individuals of 5 generations within one maternal lineage, using different portions of the community home range, but remaining within that area. But to put it into perspective, up and down the coast, we also have identified communities from the natural markings on dorsal fins up in Tampa Bay, down in Charlotte Harbor and Pine Island Sound to the south, and offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. Next, please. So we've been able to use this ability to tell individuals apart and to follow them through time. We have individuals that we've seen more than 1,500 times over more than 40 years. We've been able to use this knowledge to describe the social structure for these animals. They live in a fluid grouping situation. It's a fission-fusion society where the group composition is changing frequently. They don't live in families like humans do. There's no mom, dad, and the kids. Moms are responsible for all of the upbringing of the kids. The dads are off finding other females. And they don't live in pods, even though it's a fun word to use. It's not something that applies to bottlenose dolphins. It works for things like orcas, like killer whales, that live in very stable groupings for their entire lives. But the fluid groupings of the bottlenose dolphins can't be referred to in that way. On average, we see about 3 to 7 dolphins together in a group, but we can see as many as 20 or more. And there are 3 basic groupings. There's moms with their most recent calves, and these females are producing calves anywhere from 6 years of age up to 48 years of age. Most of the calves are born this time of year, peaking right about now, and the moms and calves stay together for about 3 to 6 years. When the calves leave their mothers, they go into groups with other juveniles until they reach maturity. When the males reach maturity, they typically form a pair bond with another male of comparable age and experience, and those winged dolphins remain together through the lives of the individuals. Next. The dolphins face a number of threats. There are natural threats that these animals face, and these include things such as disease or the failure to thrive for calves, predators such as sharks, especially bull sharks, barbs from stingrays, and red tides that destroy the prey base for the dolphins, and also the toxins can kill the dolphins. But in addition to these natural threats, there are a number of human threats that they have to face as well, and they don't get to choose which of these threats they're going to face at any given time. They're facing concurrent and cumulative threats. So the things that they have to worry about from humans include entanglement in fishing gear, especially, or ingestion or hooking by fishing gear. Rarely nowadays do they encounter a fishing net, but that can be a problem for them. More often, they're entangled in crab traps and the float lines that come from those crab traps. They have threats from people who feed them, which is illegal under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And this reinforcement, this reward that dolphins get for coming up next to a boat, leads to problems with the dolphins being hit by vessels and injured by them, or becoming entangled in fishing gear when they come nearby. It alters the dolphin's behavior, and it makes about as much sense as that picture of the guy trying to feed a Twinkie to the bear. They face pollution in a variety of forms, whether it be things that wash into the waters or airborne contaminants that come into the area. They face noise pollution and disturbance from construction activities. They're facing the effects of climate change over time. In Sarasota, we did not feel the effects of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, but oil spills are an issue for dolphins in other parts of the Gulf of Mexico, and there's every possibility it could happen in Sarasota as well. One of the things these animals have to contend with is the fact that they're very good at learning. And the genealogy that I show over on the left-hand side, it's 4 generations of one maternal lineage. And it shows the great-great-grandmother, or the great-grandmother, I guess it is, with a red box around here. Any of the animals with the red outline, this is indicative of the animals engaging in unnatural feeding behaviors, meaning they interact with humans. Those dolphins that have a slash through them mean that they've died. Those with a plus means that they've been injured from human activities. And as you can see within this lineage, involving the matriarch who has spent her time around fishing boats and other human activities to a great extent, most of her kids, her grandkids, and her great-grandkid have engaged in human activities that can be dangerous to them. They learn, they are rewarded by fish, and they reinforce these behaviors and continue them, teaching them generation after generation. Next slide. The dolphins of Sarasota Bay have been of benefit to dolphins in other places. They've been used as a reference population, for example, relative to the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. When this oil spill happened in 2010, it hit the northern Gulf of Mexico, especially Louisiana and Mississippi Sound, heavily. It didn't get any closer than 80 some miles from Sarasota. So we had the opportunity to compare what was going on with the dolphins in Sarasota Bay with regards to health and population dynamics with what was happening with those up in the oiled area of the northern Gulf of Mexico. And what we found was that there was dramatic differences in the health of the dolphins, with the dolphins up in the Barataria Bay area being 5 times more likely to have moderate to severe lung disease. They had other diseases in greater prevalence and severity than those in Sarasota, and these diseases were consistent with what you would expect from oil exposure and toxicity. And the dolphins up in the northern Gulf show lower reproductive success. When we do health assessments, we use ultrasound to look at pregnancies. In Barataria Bay, only 20% of those pregnancies yield a live calf, against Sarasota Bay, where we see 83% of these pregnancies being successful. So the dramatic differences between the two areas were one of the things that helped bring BP to the negotiation table to settle what is the worst environmental disaster in this country so far. Next. We engage in conservation activities that are at the population level, but we also have gotten to know these animals as individuals and care about them as individuals. And we respond to those individuals that are in trouble. When there's an entangled dolphin or a dolphin that's out of its natural habitat that needs to go back to its natural habitat, the National Marine Fisheries Service, the agency that's responsible for protecting these animals, comes to us, and because of our experience with the health assessments, asks us to lead rescue operations in many cases, so that we can remove the gear that's around these animals or return them to where they're supposed to be so they can carry on with their lives. The interventions primarily have involved line entanglements of various kinds, as you can see through the photographs here. There was one case of a Speedo bathing suit over on the left-hand side in the middle that was unusual. But in general, these interventions make a difference. In the bottom photo on the right, there are 4 mother-calf pairs. 3 of those mothers have benefited from our intervention. So without our intervention, it's very likely that 3 of these mothers and their calves would not have been available for that photograph. Next. So we've done a lot of work over the years, over 50 years. We're still just getting started in many ways. We're still learning a great deal about these animals. And we're very thankful for the assistance we've gotten from a variety of organizations, especially those shown here in the listing below, and the very large number of people who have worked with us over the years to help make a difference for our program. We've got a fantastic staff. We've got a wonderful institution backing us for the last 30 years through the Chicago Zoological Society. And we're very pleased that we've had so much support from the public over the years. And with that, I'm ready to take questions if people are willing to listen to my dog whine in the background because there's thunder outside now.
Randy, thank you so much. I'm excited to jump into our question portion of today's presentation. So our first question is going to come from Alicia, who asks, how much does an average dolphin weigh?
So for an average adult dolphin, if it's a female, it'll weigh on the order of about 400 pounds to 500 pounds. For a male, it can be as much as 600 pounds in Sarasota. It varies from place to place, but that's in Sarasota, that would be what we would expect.
Next question comes from Kelly, who asks, what is the next frontier in dolphin research? What can we expect in terms of cutting edge topics for dolphin research in the next decade or so?
Boy, there's so much out there that we don't know. As we get to know these animals a little bit better by monitoring them through time, the questions just become more interesting and more detailed. A lot of what's happening now is expanding our ability to understand what's happening underwater with the animals. In some places, we can see through the water and observe their behavior and their activities. And things like drones are helping us to do this to an even more effective extent than we have in the past. But other things happen at depth where you can't see what's going on. And so there's tremendous technology that's being developed to be able to not only study the behavior of the animals by recording the movements of the animals through something called a digital archival tag or a D-tag, but it records the sounds the animals are hearing or producing at that time. And there are camera systems that are being developed that are small enough to go on these animals and follow them, be mounted on them so they can record their activities. So we're getting to the point where we can really begin to understand what goes on out of sight for us and what is in the normal realm of habitat for these animals where they are interacting with one another on a regular basis.
Bruce is curious, how do you know how old an individual dolphin is?
That's a really good question. The vast majority of the dolphins in Sarasota Bay are ones that we've known from the time they were born. We knew their mothers, we knew their grandmothers, and we've just simply been here long enough to be able to keep track of them. But there are dolphins that are older than our project. And for those, we had the benefit of veterinarians who worked with us, and under local anesthesia, they would take one of the 100 or so teeth that they have, and that tooth would be section stained and looked at under a microscope, where you can look at the growth layer groups in the teeth, which are just like rings in trees, and you can get a very accurate indication of the age of the animals from that. So that's how we know the oldest animals. There are other techniques that are being developed now. For example, there's the National Marine Mammal Foundation and Valencia that are able to use an X-ray of the flipper of a dolphin. And by looking at the fusion of the bones in there, they've got formulae that allow them to come up with an age estimate. Or there's a group at the Florida Institute of Technology that can, or Florida FIU, that can look at the skin samples from a dolphin and do DNA tests that allow them to estimate the age. So there's a variety of techniques that are being developed that will allow us to learn more, especially from remote sampling of the animals or remote observations of the animals, that are going to really open up our understanding in the next few years.
Susan asks, what are your thoughts regarding the old NASA project in Miami with dolphins?
I'm afraid I don't know about that.
No problem. Barry asks, What criteria can people or tourists look at to know if it's a good idea to visit an aquarium or somewhere that has dolphins?
Well, for an aquarium to be able to have dolphins under human care, they have to go through a rigorous process of permission from the federal government to operate. So if it's in existence, then it meets legal requirements. In terms of deciding where you want to go, that really is just a personal preference in terms of what you want to see, and being able to look at the website for the organization and decide if their programs are what you want to engage in or look at is really up to the individual.
Carolyn is curious, what do dolphins eat?
Dolphins eat a variety of prey. They specialize in prey that makes sounds. In Sarasota Bay, from analysis of stomach contents of stranded dolphins, we've learned that there's a huge variety of fish. The number one fish that they eat is the pinfish, which is one of the most abundant fish. And I liken that to rice in a human diet. It's the filler. But the dolphins actually select fish that make sounds. They have extremely good hearing abilities, and they're able to listen for the sounds that fish make and use those to key in on the fish and be able to capture them. They could use their sonar and search for fish using that technique, but what that opens them up to is the possibility they're going to tap the fish on the shoulder and let them know that they're coming for them. So this way, by listening for the fish and sneaking up on them and using the fish's own sounds, it seems to be a more effective technique for prey capture.
James asks, many people try to get close to dolphins in their kayaks or sailboats. Is this a bad idea?
Dolphins have been out in these waters a lot longer than we have been. It's their home. It's our shared backyard, but it's their home, and they don't have any options for where else they can go. So we need to respect that. And the Marine Mammal Protection Act codifies that. We're not supposed to get any closer than 50 yards. That doesn't mean that the dolphins may not approach you closer than that, and that's certainly allowable, but we're supposed to remain at least 50 yards away unless we have a specific permit from the federal government that allows a closer approach.
Deborah is curious, how many calves can a mother calve at one time?
We know of cases where females have produced twins, but I don't know of any case where both calves have survived. The vast majority of cases involve a single birth, and the mother will keep that calf with her for 3 to 6 years. Over the course of a lifetime, they can have many calves. We've documented as many as 11 calves in a series for a particular female, and they're not yet to the age of 48, which is the oldest that we've seen females producing. So they probably have more calves ahead of them.
Jorge is wondering, how do you get involved in dolphin research?
How do you get involved with dolphin research? One of the best ways is to become a volunteer and to be an intern, for example. There's a lot of demand by students to get involved in research programs. And so to do this sort of thing, it means getting in touch with an organization that takes internships or has internships and offers opportunities to interns, and apply for that and become involved in the process. Because there's so many people interested in getting into the field, you shouldn't expect to have a paying internship. You should expect to start out as a volunteer. I started out as a volunteer. And then see where it goes. See if it's the kind of work that you really want to do for the long term. See if you develop a good relationship with a particular lab or research program that can bring you on board to work with them for longer periods of time, or perhaps to come on board as a grad student.
Morgan asks, what changes have you seen since the SDRP started, either in regards to Sarasota Bay itself or in dolphin behavior or research techniques?
We've seen a lot in the last 50 years. I moved to Florida in 1969. Since 1970, there's been nearly a quadrupling in the number of people in the Sarasota area, and the same for the number of boats. There's tens of thousands of boats in the area. We're fortunate that the dolphins have remained in the area during this entire period. They've not moved out in spite of significant changes to their habitat. There's been initial declines in seagrass meadows, which support the prey fish that they eat. And there have been a recovery to some extent of those seagrass meadows over the last couple of decades. But there's been a lot of coastal development and things that you might expect would put a lot of pressure on the dolphins. So whatever we can do to try to reduce that pressure and give them the space and the resources they need to survive, we should.
We have time for just a few more questions. Our next one comes from Knives, who asks, the medical checks that you do on dolphins, how are those performed? Is it at all stressful for the dolphin?
I'm sure the dolphins would prefer to go about their normal day without having us take some time out to be able to do the medical checks, but they work out pretty well. We encircle small groups of dolphins in shallow water and have a team of veterinarians and biologists and handlers that work with them and release them back on site within an hour or two, typically. Some of these animals have been through it many times over the course of decades, and there are no long-term impacts from the work that we do with them. In fact, from after the first time that the animals are encircled in the net, it's typically pretty easy to work with them once they're encircled. You can walk up to many of them and put your arms around them and move them over to the sling that brings them up on the boat for the medical exam. So there seems to be a learning process that works in our favor and suggests that it's not too stressful an operation for the animals.
Claire is wondering, how much does a newborn dolphin weigh?
We don't handle newborn dolphins, but based on information that's come from stranded newborn dolphins, they're typically on the order of about, I think, 30 to 50 pounds.
And our final question for today is going to come from Bruce, who says, from your talk, I've learned that dolphins are long-lived. What is the maximum lifespan of a dolphin?
That's a good question. The oldest dolphin that we know of is Nick Lowe that I described earlier, and she lived to be 67 years of age. That's probably over 100 in human years. Most of the females don't make it into their 60s. Most of the males don't make it into their 50s. We have yet to come up with the average lifespan that takes following a cohort from birth until death, and given their long lifespan, that's not been something we've fully accomplished yet. So we can come up with rough estimates, but the maximum age that we know of is about 67. That's not to say there aren't older dolphins elsewhere. There's just not that many people who have looked at the ages of dolphins.
Well, Dr. Wells, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. Do you have any final thoughts or remarks you would like to leave our attendees with?
No, I'm just very happy that people cared enough to join us today. And I guess the final word I would say is that we have to recognize that these animals do share our habitat, and we share their habitat. It's home to them. They utilize the same waters that we swim in. They breathe the same air we breathe. They catch and eat the same fish we eat. So we're kind of in this together. They can be sentinels of ecosystem health, but we don't want this ecosystem to get in such a condition that we detect changes in them that could then affect us. So the more we can do to protect their environment now and give them the conditions they need to survive and thrive out in our waters, the better off we're all going to be as we share these common waters.
Well, thank you again. We really appreciate your time. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Stephanie to wrap things up.
Thanks, Brian, and thank you, Dr. Wells. That makes me want to volunteer to learn a lot more about dolphins. We want to thank everyone for joining us today on the call to learn about dolphin research and conservation. Very special thank you to Dr. Randall Wells for joining us from the Chicago Zoological Society's Sarasota Dolphin Research Program. Once again, our Friday Q&As with the scientists take place weekly at 3 p.m. as part of a collaboration between scientists in every Florida school and the Community Scholars Initiative. You can learn more about our guests as well as our programs by visiting the websites you see on your screen. You can find a recording of today's program at the UF Thomson Earth Systems YouTube channel. Please be sure to register for next Friday's Q&A when we're going to explore the wild world of glaciers. We can't wait to see you then. Take care and goodbye. Thanks.